get straight to the lecture. Today we'll talk about parts of the skull, specifically only the cranial part. So face bones of the skull like the bottom jaw or mandibula will be left out today, and we'll talk about just the parts, nothing more specific, just bones that go into the structure of the skull. So we have ethmoid bone, frontal bone, interparietal bone, occipital bone, parietal bone, sphenoid bone, and temporal bone. You can check your knowledge right away on this beautiful bovine skull to see what you know, what you don't know, and let's get straight to the rest of the lecture. The first bone we're going to talk about is the ethmoid bone, the one located right here. Now this bone is hard to see, almost impossible to see from the outside unless you're looking directly from the bottom. And this bone is located right here, and this is what it looks like. So this bone is quite fragile. It's well aerated, has pores, has sinuses, and it's important for the breathing function. But since they were only talking about the parts, I'm gonna leave it there, and hopefully you comment and you watch this video, and we'll talk in more detail later on. Next we have the frontal bone, os frontale. Now this is one of the biggest bones considering the skull, and it's located here. Here we have pig's skull, and here we have bovine skull. And here you can see it in a different color in the graphic picture. Now, one key element to take away from this lecture today is that even though we're talking about the same bone, which is frontal bone, different animals will have differently spaced frontal bones and other bones as well, because their location, as you can see, is kind of different. Here we have pig's skull, as I already mentioned, and you can see that the frontal bone doesn't take as much space as the one on the bovine or on a cow skull. So, even though you know the location, you need to remember that different animals have differently spaced bones. Here we have the interparietal bone. It's a small bone, and it's located right here. So interparietal bone basically differentiates two parietal bones because this bone is single while parietal bones are double. Again, about double and single bones we'll talk about in the future because this is not part of the lecture. So here you have the interparietal bone on the horse's skull. Here you have it on the canine skull. And this is the location of looking at it from the back on the bovine skull. So as you can see, we have 3 different species, and every different species has a differently located interparietal bone. Horses have it more on the dorsal side of the skull, while canines like dogs or bovines have it further in the back. Next up we have the occipital bone, os occipitale, which is located right here at the bottom. Now this is a big bone. All of it is occipital bone. Everything here, it has a lot of different parts, which we will talk about in the future if you show interest. And this is where you can see it on the canine skull as well. It's right here. Now the location is more or less similar of this bone, so it is a little less difficult. The only thing you need to remember that still some of its parts will look different, and it's one of the things that help identify different bones. Let's say you find something that was buried many years ago, and the differences of these bones, if you don't have an entire skull, help identify what kind of species it was. And also subscribe for videos on specific bones. The parietal bone. We already talked about the interparietal bone, so remember where it is. I'm gonna give you a second. And now the parietal bone. It's right here. Now, on the canine skull again, number 8 right here. And this is also a dog skull, so this is the same, only this is graphic and this is a real skull shown to you in picture. It's right here. The sphenoid bone. It's another bone that's kind of hard to locate from the outside, so you can guess where it is if you don't know already. So this is where it hides. Here we have a horse's skull, also graphic view of it. So it's that light blue bone located almost in the eye socket. So this is how it looks just on its own. And as you can see, some part of it is missing, so it's one of more fragile bones as well, and it has thin parts of the bone in some areas. Also, you can see that it has some holes for nerves or veins or arteries, so it's another thing to consider for the future. But it's a small bone. It has a lot of parts to it, but still it's a little smaller, so harder to locate. Last bone of today's lecture is the temporal bone. It exceeds quite a bit, so this is the temporal bone right here. Also, it is here on a bovine skull, and you can see it colored in dark green, where you can see where it starts and where it ends. So again, some of these bones differ, as I already mentioned. Some have different curves, or some have more holes than the others. So these are things that you need to consider. And again, if you would like, we will make some more lectures on different bones, talking about everything about that bone that needs to be known. So thank you for watching. Again, this is the literature and our sources. Everything will be linked down below. Feel free to use it. I'm using it, so I'm just sharing the information that I find online, and hopefully it will help you as well. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.